chase, and no matter what, I'm living. Put that on everything. I got a dream to chase, and no matter what, I'm living.
Okay. Good evening once again. My name is President Wilson Kamau. I'm the president of Nairobi Rotary Club of Nairobi Madaraka. I'm glad that you could all join us today evening. I see our guest speaker has joined us already. Thank you so much for joining. I'll be your host for this evening. I now officially call this meeting to order. So allow me to invite Rotarian Fred Ngwenyi to lead us in the Rotary Grace. Fred?
The Rotary Grace. O Lord and giver of all good, we thank thee for all our daily food. May Rotary friends and Rotary ways help us to serve thee all our days.
Thank you, Rotarian Fred. I'll now like to propose a toast. If you have a glass, charge it. If you don't, hand over hat. A toast to the President of the Republic of Kenya. Okay. I'd like to invite Jennifer. Jennifer, please help us in doing the four-way test. Jennifer, are you there?
Hey, sorry, I had left. I'm back. Sema.
Four-way test.
Sawa, haina shida.
Jennifer.
Hey, Sema.
Oh, go ahead
Yes,
with the four-way
President.
test. Oh,
Sorry? You want me to
you do
say
the
it?
four-way test. Lead us in the four-way test.
Right now?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was later. I'm sorry. Okay, so the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Jennifer. So I've seen we joined today evening with a couple of guests. I would love that you tell us your name and what you do. I'll start off with and just tell us who invited you for the meeting. Yes. So I'll start off with Liz Wambogo. Unmute.
Hello, hi, how are you?
Hi.
Sorry, I can't switch on my camera. I'm in darkness.
It's okay.
So I am Liz Wambugu. I actually wasn't invited. I saw the link on Elsie's status update. Elsie and I used to work some time back, so I know her personally, and I figured it is something interesting to join. I am also in grants management, project management. Have been for over the last 10 years now. So I was quite curious to join into this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today evening. I see Joram.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
My name is Joram Mulwa. I'm a Rotarian from Nairobi Thika Road. currently serving as the chair of director. I saw the e-card on your Twitter account, and my classification is project management.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Joram, for joining. We're glad our social media is working. Yeah. I see here, Marianne. Marianne? Marianne, you still there? Yes. Internet. Okay. True Fossa, let's wait for Marianne.
Okay, good evening. My name is Trukosa Oguna. I was invited by Malaki.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes.
Sorry, True Fossa, what do you do? Just sorry, if I may ask.
I'm an accountant by profession. So right now I do freelance accounting for SMEs. So I love seeing SMEs thrive and embrace accounting in their day-to-day business.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to have another content on the call. I see Wanja Gitari.
Good evening.
Evening.
I'm Wanja Gitari. I'm an architect, and I was invited by Tony Maingi, who's my friend. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Wanja, for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, sorry. Marianne, are you available? Okay, thanks. But anyway, thanks. We love having visitors to our club. Thank you so much for joining, and we wish you. We hope that we'll fellowship with you going forward into the future. It's now time for announcements. I have there are two announcements from our club admin director. He's not in today, but I'm standing for him. So over the weekend, we had the installation of the board of directors and the president, myself. We had it at the Brazilian Rodízio in Lavington. It was an awesome event. Part of why we did the event then was to raise some funds for a project that we are trying to carry out. So we don't have the figures yet, but I know we definitely surpassed our target in terms of what we wanted to raise for the event, for the project. So I want to thank each and every one of us who participated in the event in whatever way for coming through on Saturday. It was truly a success. If you didn't make it, I know you missed out. Also, a final announcement, I think from the treasurer's desk, as members here present, if you have not paid up your dues, please pay up your dues. As you know, we have commitments to Rotary International, to the district, and to the country to pay. So we need your support in doing this. So if you have not paid up your dues, please do so. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite our IPP to introduce our guest speaker. Over to you, Samuel Malaki. Malaki?
Sorry, Mr. President. My attempts to multitask has failed me. Okay. Rotarians, Rotaractors and guests, good evening. I'd like the great pleasure of introducing today's speaker. Our speaker this evening is Elsie Kariuki. Elsie is a seasoned project management professional with extensive experience in program and fund management and financial management, gained through implementing and expanding development projects in Africa, and working with a diverse and reputable institutions in different multilateral donor-funded projects, including but not limited to Global Fund, DFID, USAID, GAVI, and MasterCard Foundation. Presently, she is the Assistant Project Manager with Options Consultancy, UK, where she provides project management support to programs majority supporting women and girls. She previously worked for KPMG Kenya under the International Development and Advisory Department. She is currently pursuing an MSc in Public Financial Management from SOAS, University of London, and is an alumni of the University of Nairobi. She is also an ACCA affiliate. She is passionate about bringing about change, especially when it means making the lives of girls and women safer and better. Away from work, she enjoys traveling, discovering new places, cultures, and cuisines, reading biographies, and retail therapy. Let's welcome Rtn Elsie. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Rotarians, Rotaractors, and friends. My name is Elsie, or Rtn Elsie Kariuki. I'm still getting used to the Rotarian part, having just joined in May this year. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Malaki, for the introduction. And I'm looking forward to us learning, us engaging as I share what I do as my vocation. So I've been privileged, or I am privileged to serve as a project manager, currently working for Options Consultancy in the UK, which is based in the UK, but I'm based in Kenya, where I practically manage different projects, majorly women and gender project that seeks to end or eradicate the eradication of FGM in Africa by the end of 2030. And so this evening, I'll just be sharing basically what I do, what project management entails, and probably what I have learned best, given my few years in the field. I need to see, sorry, can you see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So one would ask, or I know there are Rotaractors in the meeting. One would ask, what journey do I need to go through to become a project manager? This shows the journey that I've come through, or how I have come up to, or how I've ended up being a project manager. So the story started probably 3 years ago, having undertaken a bachelor's degree in land economics, and at the same time doing my ACCA, or getting my ACCA accreditation. After that, I was privileged to join KPMG as an auditor through the trainee, or the graduate trainee program, where I did serve for 1.5 years as an auditor. And this experience majorly is what I used to which propelled me or gave me the foundation for becoming a project or being involved in the project of program management. And still in KPMG is where I joined the IDAS department, or the International Development Department, where I have worked with various stakeholders, worked in different countries and under different projects in different thematic areas, from health to governance and all that. So the journey is different for everyone. Some might start straight from project management, or having gotten a project management accreditation from school, and becoming or joining as an entry-level project trainee or program management trainee. Others like me might zigzag a bit and then still come back to project management. But what I say is that, or what I have come to see is that all your all your experiences, no matter where you start from, really ends up shaping the kind of project or program management manager that you become. So one may ask, who is a project manager? Simply said, I would say that a project manager is one who knows how to balance the art and the science of project. The art being that you should be able, or rather you should be able to develop skills, or yes, you should be able to develop skills that enable you to lead, motivate, and empower people. And at the same time, you should be able to balance the science part of the project management, of which this is best expressed by the triple constraint triangle, as you can see this emoji, where the three main questions that a project manager will be juggling or they'll be asked to answer is, what are we doing? How much will it cost? And when will it be done? So essentially, what you're trying to balance is the scope. That is the what are we doing? The scope being what is your end goal? What activity or what service are we offering at the end of this? So what are our deliverables? And what is needed for us to deliver that deliverable? That comes with how much will it cost? So where are the resources? Resources in terms of cost, resources in terms of personnel. Who are you going to deliver this with? And lastly, when will it be done? So the time constraints, how much time do I have to deliver what needs to be delivered? So the job of a program manager is to ensure that this triangle stays balanced, given that the constraints are interdependent. So time, the scope, and the resources all depend on each other. And one needs to understand the relationships and the trade-offs that exists so that between the constraints, so that you can be able to deliver, to balance this triangle. So at times you'll have that time is non-negotiable, it's inflexible. So for example, if the project that we're supposed to undertake is supposed to be done probably before a drought season or before the rainy season. So you can't negotiate with time, but probably you can negotiate with the scope of the project, or you can negotiate with the resources that you have. So as a project manager, you need to balance, you need to learn how to balance, to know what is flexible, what is inflexible when it comes to the three constraints that you have. So once you learn how to balance the science and the art of the project, probably is when you can say that you're a successful project manager. Well, it looks as, or rather it sounds as, it sounds very simple, but it's a very, it's a very tricky balance to maintain with time. And one may ask, why do you need a project manager, or why is the increased need to have a project manager in whatever project that you have? So one is that there's that increased need for accountability, day in, day out. We have to account for every shilling that is spent in whatever project. So it doesn't have to be a donor-funded project. It doesn't have to be even a government-funded project. So for example, we are all, or rather you'll find all of us Kenyans questioning how much, or the worth of probably the SGR project that we had. So the increased need of accountability propels the need for a project manager, so that whether it's horizontally, and horizontally probably means amongst other institutions on your level. So if you're in an NGO, other NGOs, you need to be able to provide that accountability to that, whether it's upward, the government, the donor, there needs to be that accountability, or you need to show that value for money when it comes to a project. The other reason that projects the need for a project manager is that project manager are constantly being viewed as agents of change. As time goes by, there's that need for us to demonstrate, or rather to show, what are we doing for the communities and the beneficiaries? What are projects delivering when it comes to the lives of the communities and the lives of the beneficiaries? So to gain that, or rather to as the bridge between the donors or the funders and what we view as our communities and the beneficiaries stands the project manager, who needs to balance both sides, demonstrate this change and how it comes about. So one may ask, what entails project management, or when you say that you're in the project management field, what do you get to do on a day-to-day basis? I'll simply say this is what sums up what a project manager does, or what project management entails. Different, I'd say different industries, different institutions have different ways of presenting how they phase a project, but it essentially, or rather the principle remains the same. So you may have probably institutions that phase their projects as a life cycle, or you may also have industries that do the same, but the principle remains the same. So when you say the principle remains the same, what do you mean? We mean, for example, for a project to start, there is the identification and the definition phase of that project, which is the beginning of that. So here is when you identify either a need or an opportunity, or you have an idea to do something. So for example, in your day-to-day basis, you find that there's a way to do something, what you do, you can do it is faster or easier or more efficient. So that's an idea, or that's an opportunity that you have identified. So you can draft a concept note and identify probably someone to fund that, and a project begins from there. You might respond to an expression of interest that has been drawn upon by other parties, let's say either the government or the donor, any other funders in your industry. You might find there's a need for a particular good or service in where you are. So that brings about, that ignites or rather starts up the project. And the identification and definition phase is one important phase that clearly defines the rest of the project in terms of you can't go back to changing what your ultimate goal is that you identified and that you actually raised money for, or that has been raised money for from the beginning. So from here is when you need to make those go or no go decisions. So are you able to identify your targets? Are you able to identify who are the stakeholders who are going to work with? Are you able to identify the beneficiaries of this good or service that you want to come up with? And here is when you need to do your needs assessment, you draft your concept notes, your proposals, and all that, and submit now for funding, which will lead you to the next step, which is a setup. And in this phase is where probably your funding sources, you've already gotten your funding sources, or you're still in the negotiation stage. And this is where you need to think about how the project is going to be managed. So you need to sit at this, in a real life scenario, this is probably where project managers come in. If it's an organization that, or rather, which is the case for most organizations, they ideally hire a project manager once they have or seem to have secured funding for a particular project. So this is where you need to think about your tools. This is where you need to think about your processes, what plans are required to carry out your project. So probably you have a risk management strategy. You can have how you're going to supply to manage your supply chain, your human resources. If it's governance, this is where you set up your board. This is where you set up an executive committee. All that is done in the setup stage. After which now is when now you go into planning. Setup and planning in some organizations is done concurrently, which is also okay. The planning stage is also what we call the co-creation phase. And this is where now after you have done your setup, or rather the things that you considered in your setup, this is where now you build up on the strategy build up. on the strategies that you had in your previous phase, which was a setup phase. So you have farmed up your communication plan, your risk management plan. If it's human resources, this is where you're hiring people because you've already identified the people that you want for that project in the setup phase. If it's in terms of risk management, you've already identified the risks that might face your project throughout the life of the project. So at this phase, you have now come up with a risk plan after identifying those projects. So you know which risks to mitigate, which risks to avoid, etc., etc. So this part of the project can be seen as one that, and that is why it's not linear. It's not linear as the other stages of the project, because it seems to be evolving in terms of you need to revisit each time you go through the project, or as you go with the project onwards. So you need to reflect on the project realities as you go, as you move on, and then revisit this this part of the project. So probably your risks may change. So for example, 2020 or the end of 2019 was a huge or made a huge impact into the risk plans for most projects because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we needed to learn how to, was it a risk that we could mitigate? Was it a risk that we could manage? Was it a risk that we could avoid, and all that? So in whatever stage of the project that you are in, even if you're in the project closure or in the implementation phase going forward, you need to come back and revise your planning or whatever tools that you need, you used in your planning stage. Planning is also key, because what you set out for, or rather what you cast in for the project going forward, is what you're going to use for the project going forward. So for example, if it's a team that you have selected, you need to be very keen in terms of the capabilities or the capacities that they have, because that is what you're going to use going forward into the project. So you need to be very, or rather as a project manager, when it comes to the planning stage, you need to get your books in order, or your ducks in a row, I would say that. After planning is when we move now into the main bit of the project, which is in the implementation. So whatever activities that are supposed to be done for you to realize your end goal is what you do in the implementation phase. So if it's a project, probably to reduce maternal death in an area, this is where you're implementing the activities that are aimed towards that. If it's a project, probably, for example, the project I'm in, eradicate FGM at the end of 2030. This is where our activities come to realize. One thing to note as a project manager, or rather one thing that project managers probably have to do very well in this phase, is stakeholder and people management, because this is when now you get to work with people. All along you have probably you've just been engaging in ideas, in documentation and all that, where the real work comes in. And stakeholder and people management need to be, sorry, there's a background noise. Thank you, Mr. President. So at this stage is where you have your the art part of your project management skill come to test, because this is where you are learning, or rather you get to learn to engage and manage people. This is where you get to see how people work, the different team dynamics that are there, and you need to do that, or rather you need to adapt into that very fast. The other thing that you get to do as a project manager during implementation is that you start managing issues. Given all that you have done up to this stage has been quote unquote virtual, I would say that it has not yet been tested into the real world. So there are just possibilities. If it's probably risks you are coming up that you came up with in the risk register during planning, these are risks that you probably have seen in other projects from your experience, or risks that from different team experiences that are there. They are not. This is when now you get to realize the actual risks of the project, or rather, the project presents itself, and you get to see the risks that are there. So this is one major thing that you also be doing, is that you'll be managing issues that are coming up from the program realities that are now there. So the other thing that you've also been doing, which I've mentioned, is the managing of people and the managing of internal controls. And internal controls differs from industry to industry. So, for example, in the internal control, or in an area that involves financial management. So you have probably internal controls in terms of reporting, in terms of what your partners need to do to mitigate certain fiduciary risks and all that. So in the implementation phase is the live phase of the project. This is where it comes to test, or all that comes together. And you need to, this is also the part where you also need to learn to balance things very fast. You need to deliver things on budget and within the scope, and also to give the highest quality that is possible. So an implementation phase for a project manager is, I would say, the craziest phase of all the phases that are there. And lastly, we have the project closure phase. And project closure can come in different forms. So you can have your project either coming to an end, you can have a handover, of which you're handing over probably to a bigger INGO, or you're handing over to the government if it's a project that was being delivered through the government. You can also have an extension, which can be a costed or a not costed extension. You can have an expansion, or you can have a redesign. So all those are forms of closures when it comes to a project. And you have to be well versed in terms of what is needed with the different types of project closures that are there. One key thing with project closures is that you have to, as a project manager, you have to have a sustainability plan in place. So it's not just a project coming to an end, but our intended outcomes or the goals of the project are going to be felt going forward. So it's not just a white elephant that you're leaving people's memories. You need to have that sustainability plan for us to say, or rather for there to be said that this was a successful project. Also, project closure comes with its own challenges in terms of everyone is leadership, for example. So you're having probably colleagues that are transitioning, you're having colleagues that are leaving the project and going to another project. You may also have challenges in terms of either a shortfall, or you're having excess funding, depending on how your activities went through in implementation. So project closure is also a challenging phase for a project manager, because you need to consider all those constraints in place, and at the same time close out the project in whatever manner that you're closing. To note, most people put the monitoring, the mail function, the monitoring, evaluation, and learning as one phase in the project. But ideally, monitoring and evaluation and learning is a process that should go throughout the 5 phases of a project. So whether it's identification or planning or closure, there should be continuous monitoring of the project, learning, adaptability, accountability, as opposed to having it as a standalone phase. So one would ask, given all this, or given all what entails project management, what do you do as a project manager in a day? So apart from forwarding emails, which is not all that we do, a project manager it largely depends on which phase of the project you're in. So for example, if you're in the identification or setup and planning, you'll find you have more meetings than probably in the implementation phase. And given the era of COVID, which has limited probably our meetings and workshops. So you'll find what you do in a day largely depends on what stage of a project of the project you're in. If it's, for example, documentation, or rather maintaining communication and emails and all that, it's much more at the beginning of the project rather than towards the end. If it's in terms of probably team management, performance reviews and all that, that is more towards the implementation and closure of a project as opposed to the beginning. So I would say what a project manager does in a day is very dependent on the phase they're in the project. But obviously that the things that are a constant. So for example, communication, as I've mentioned, team management, you have to keep motivating your team, you have to keep giving your team updates and whatever is always happening in the project. You have to continue building relationship with the stakeholders, whether it's the donor, whether it's the beneficiaries, whether it's your partners. You have to continue. Relationship building is probably a continuous process. So a day in the life of a project manager is a lot more than forwarding just emails. So what have I learned in the short period of being a project manager? One is that you can't plan enough. There'll always be surprises when it comes to project management. There'll always be something that has been unplanned. You're always going to be facing surprises, whether it's when it comes to resources, whether it comes to capacity, whether it comes to budgets. So for example, those that are managing FCDO, formerly DFID projects, know that the shift from 0.7% to 0.5% of the UK's budget has done a number on the projects that are existing and also the projects that were meant to start that are funded by FCDO. So you need to learn how to proactively identify those challenges that could impact the project. Number two, you need to communicate and listen, but you need to listen more. As a project manager or in project management, you find yourself really giving a lot of information, sometimes information overload, passing a lot of information to and from, whether it's vertical, whether it's horizontally, you're passing a lot of information. But at the end of the day, you need to learn how to listen, especially to your team and also to the people on the ground. So the people that are implementing whatever project that they're implementing, you need to learn to listen and listen actively. And active listening also enables you as a project manager to identify those constraints or identify probably risks that could be facing your project that are not so apparent. Empathy also goes a long way. So you might find you're very good at ensuring your project is within budget, is within time, is within scope, but you find that your team is really burnt out, or your team feels that you only probably communicate or chat with them when you're having a deadline coming up and all that. So you need to practice empathy with your team. You need to listen to them when probably they're telling you something and all your focus is on, oh God, this is going to cost more money, or this is going to cause a delay, or you need to put yourself in their shoes. I would say that for you to have a team that also relates with you very well. Lastly, you need to adapt, or rather you need to learn to be adaptive. I think this has taught all of us in whatever profession, rather COVID has taught all of us to do this, to be adaptive in all that we do. Project management is something that changes with time, or I would say it has changed with time. And you need to go, or rather move along with the changes. Take what works for you, for your project. What can, ask in every single day, ask yourself, what can I do to make this project work more efficiently? How can I make my team more effective? And that comes with adapting. And that also comes with being agile, being able to accept, or being able to be flexible to change. Yeah, so I will leave it at that and probably have a Q&A for anyone that has a question about probably what I've talked about. Over to you, Wilson.
Thank you so much, Rtn Elsie, for that talk. As she mentioned, it's now time for Q&A. If you have a question for Elsie, please raise your hand so that you may ask, or you could also put it on the chat. So the floor is open for questions. Any questions for Elsie? Please raise your hand or put it on the chat box. Who would like to kick us off with this session? As you contemplate, perhaps Elsie, my question was, how did you learn to be a project manager? Is it something that you wanted to do? As in, what was the journey? By the time you decided to choose, is it land economics before then? What was the journey?
Thanks, Wilson. I would say it has been quite a zigzag. So probably as one of the many kids in Kenya, I wanted to be a doctor growing up. But my motivation, or what was making me choose being a medical doctor, was I really wanted to change a child's life. I really wanted those behind me to probably have a better future, or have a better chance at having a better future than they do have. And going through the motions of probably career selection, now when it got real, not the dreams or the castles in the air when I was young. My qualifications, yes, qualified me for real estate at the moment, or land economics as you call it. And it was then, or rather, would I say my third year, when I did my attachment, and I was like, oh no, I don't think I was cut out for land economics. And so I was like, Elsie, you have ACCA, what else can you do? And that's why in my fourth year, I started now looking for a plan B, which was one of the big fours, and I was lucky to get into one. And even when I got there, having to start from audit, I think one thing that stuck with me in audit was, yes, I'm seeing how much a company is making at the end of the day, but I'm not seeing the change that it's bringing at the end of the day. So, or to whoever it's bringing. And that's what informed my transition to IDAS, where I was able now to work with projects or work with stakeholders that are able to change a child's life, or what I'm able to see as a change to a child's life. So I would say that has been my journey to being a project manager. The principle has remained the same in terms of I'm still able to see women and girls, lives change in what I do. So I would say yes, achieved at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for that answer. I see Rotarian Henry has his hand up. Henry, go ahead.
Thank you. Two questions. One is that we've seen that technology is really changing how some professions are going to be in the future. How do you see project management being affected by technology now and maybe even in the future? And the second one is, now that you've achieved your aspiration to join the project management profession, what is your next goal? Maybe where you want to be in 10 years?
Wow, Henry, you've come out with the big guns. I'll try. I'll try answer your two questions. So in terms of technology, we're experiencing that, or rather that has been in the project management space for some time, where we're having project management softwares that are there. They're not totally replacing the project manager, but they are providing or simplifying the tools and the processes that a project manager has to have or has to do to efficiently manage a project. So for example, I don't have to depend totally on Excel to come up with a Gantt chart or to populate for me probably a dashboard that I would need for my work. So there are project management softwares that are there that are able to help project managers efficiently do their work more efficiently. In terms of the future, maybe yes, it's a role that might feel that impact of probably, let's say, artificial intelligence or automation of certain things. But I think, or rather my 2 cents on it would be, given the art part of project management, where we still need a people feel, we still need a human feel onto it. I don't think it would totally be replaced or be, surpassed by technology. So I would say it's a wait and see situation, or it's a wait and see vocation, where currently the software is supplementing what we do, not totally taking over what a project manager does. To answer your second question, 10 years, I haven't thought about Friday yet, Henry, but I would say maybe have a foundation of my own and being now, or actually impacting the change that I see, that I want to see in other people, and not maybe being an agent of change in terms of facilitating that process, but actually doing that process myself. Yes.
Thank you, Rtn Elsie, for that. I see on the chat is from Opot, awesome talk, thank you. Which so far was your most difficult, challenging project and why?
So I would say it was not challenging. Okay, it was challenging in some aspects, but I had a project in Sudan, and those who know, Sudan is totally Arabic speaking. So one, there's a challenge, there's already a language barrier. Then two, the level of capacity for most people in Sudan, even for example, accountants, finance, I would say the finance sector is a bit wanting when you compare it to Kenya. So that, of course, impacts your work as a project manager, because you find yourself spending more time capacity building the people that you need, or rather your team, as opposed to actually getting the work done. Two, also, or rather three, it's a very not very, but it's a volatile environment. You'd classify them as challenging working environments. So in terms of political instability, that is one major factor that probably hinders or probably makes your work a bit more difficult. So you want to push for something, but politically, something is hindering that, or you need to do a particular activity, but there's no cash flow in the country. So you need to find ways to get your activity done, despite the challenges that you're facing, or you have to find innovative ways because these are challenges that you have not experienced before. So I would say that so far has, or rather was my challenging project.
Thank you so much. There is one here from Stalin. Ask what percentage of your projects complete in time, and what do you attribute to that?
I would give it 90% of the projects that I've handled so far have worked within time. And I would accredit that to having a strong team, or rather having a team that is well equipped, both capacity-wise and technical, in terms of technical capacity, to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. So when you have a team that knows what they're doing, one is how they need to do what they're supposed to do. As a project manager, you probably have a very easy time. I would also attribute that to constant funding. I've been able to work in projects where funding has not been that much of a problem, or rather the shortfalls have not been felt. So that also has enabled the projects that I have worked with to complete in time, because the delays are fewer as compared to other projects.
Well, thanks for that. Josh asks, how do you handle competing resources? Not necessarily financial, maybe from a human resource and time perspective.
Yes, that totally happens. But one thing that has, or rather continues to help, is one plan. Probably you have staff that will be available for a particular type of project and not available for the rest of the project. So you need to identify what you need to weigh what's critical in terms of their input, what can be done, what is negotiable and what is totally non-negotiable. So for example, if it's an expert in, if you're developing a do no harm principle, for example, and you need a framework, and you need a protection, a safeguarding and protection officer. So you need to, but their time is limited. You need to identify at what point of developing that framework are they most, most, will they have the biggest impact, or when are they much needed? So as a project manager, it's up to you to identify that and allocate that resource, whether it's personnel or whether it's time or funding at that time. So you need to really be able to identify those critical points in a project.
Thank you so much. And I see lastly here from Koi, she says, thank you, Elsie, for great reflections on learning. Does project management differ in the private sector as it would in the public sector? What is your response to the adaptive and innovative project management approaches such as agile project management?
So the first question, yes. I would say the principle remains the same in terms of your the phases that your project will probably go through, but probably you have different stakeholders. You'll have how you also put in your resources might also differ. And also given the private sector is a bit more, let's say, more highly regulated than the public sector. So for example, if it's in terms of reporting, private sectors have stringent reporting requirements as compared to the public sector. also the public sector, most of the time, you are delivering something that is more, would you say more behavioral, almost intangible. So you're having projects that are, you can't say at the end of the day, this is the product or this is, so that brings a different dynamic to the public sector or developmental projects as compared to private sector projects. Sorry, what was the second? What was the second part of her question?
There was so what is your response to adaptive and innovative project management approaches such as agile project management?
I would say these have come to refine project management in terms of how which was my last point, or how flexible, how adaptable are we when it comes to change in a project. So previously, you will find that project managers were reactive instead of being proactive. So these agile practices that have come, adaptive practices that have come in project management have enabled project managers or the project management process to be able to anticipate the risks and the issues or the constraints that we have in a project, as opposed to you reacting to them. So as a project manager or in the project management world, it's very helpful if you're able to bring on board these approaches to your project. And also it's good to note that, for example, donors are leaning more towards projects that are adaptive in nature, as opposed to projects that are just probably reactive, responding to an issue or a problem once it has arisen. So given that indication, it will be good for any project manager or any institution to be responsive to adaptive management practices.
Thank you so much also for that. I'd like now to invite Rtn Dirango Ngunjiri to give the vote of thanks. Rtn Dirango, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. A very rich presentation from Rtn Elsie Kariuki. Indeed, for us in my village, we call it the foreman. And now, for me, I've got to understand what project management involves. And it is very interesting and very enlightening. And I appreciate your talk very much, and felt as if you are talking to me directly. And I believe all the members felt that we are discussing with them and we are advising them to do what we do, especially on the individual level and also as a club. In lottery, it's one of our aim in projects, but sometimes we fail in whatever you do in projects. And I think you will be very much of reach to us as a club in delivering these projects and implementing the projects from the word go. As you have stated about the journey of a project, from how to be a project manager, from the training, from the university, and how project management involve. And the project manager is so good in accountability, checking on quality, and also checking on project deliverables, and also checking on the funders of the club. As Rotary, we do a lot of funding and requesting for funds. And being a project manager, you're able to bring the funders and the club together. And also, the project management entails a lot, identify the need, as well as indicated, identify the beneficiary, identifying the concept notes for the funding, and also having the setup and planning. And finally, the implementation and closure. I wish to thank you so much for the talk. It was a great talk and very. Mr. President, on behalf of the club, thank you so much, Elsie Kariuki, for this talk. And I wish for you to join the service projects committee. You'll be very much helpful in this committee for them to have implementation of our project. Thank you so much, Elsie, for that talk. Thank you, Mr. President. Back
you.